Rightmove has just released their house price index for February 2023, and I have some big issues with the way this data has been presented. Now, I still firmly believe that we are in the early days of a big crash, but this data and the way it's been presented and the way that mainstream media outlets are presenting this data may suggest otherwise. So in this video, I want to go through the data and maybe highlight some of the things that Rightmove themselves aren't highlighting, or maybe some of the things that the mainstream media have been glossing over, and then you can make your own decision about the health of the housing market. So let's focus on their three key stats they've got at the very top of their report. And the first one is the monthly asking price change, which remains static. So they've got that at 0%, which doesn't sound too bad, especially when you consider in January, they were reporting an increase of 0.9%. So if Rightmove have reported 0.9% increase in January and sideways in February, that doesn't sound overly negative for the housing market. So how is there a house price crash going on? Well, let's take this stat first and go into a bit more detail. So let's jump into their blog. Now the headline, let me blow this up a little bit bigger for you guys. Better than expected market surprises many as buyers return. And I think we're going to disprove that in this video. So the very first bit here, average new seller asking prices remain flat this month. And the most important part of that sentence, which gets missed by all of the media outlets, is average new seller asking prices remain flat this month. Now they are talking about new instructions, new listings on Rightmove. So for any of you guys that have been looking on Rightmove over the past month or two, and I'm sure that's probably almost all of you if you're watching this type of video, you've probably seen reduction after reduction after reduction. There are so many reductions going on Rightmove at the moment. Now, of course, this is going to vary by region depending on which area you're looking at, and some regions may not be experiencing that, but certainly based on the people I've interacted with on Twitter, and I've got a pretty good coverage of the UK, people report in different areas, we're seeing reductions in a lot of places. So when they say that month-on-month asking prices are sideways, what they actually mean is month-on-month, only new seller asking prices are sideways, not existing listings. So people that listed in December or November or October before, or even probably the first half of January, those that have now reduced their price isn't included in this data. So I think it's quite misleading to have the headline that monthly asking prices are sideways this month, as it doesn't include existing listings. So that's the first thing I want you to take away from this video and from this report. The next thing, annual price growth is 3.9%. Sounds quite positive. Well, let's put this into context. And if we go to a graph from builtplace.com, let me just hide the webcam so you guys can see the most important part. And when you see this with a bit more context, this sudden drop off all of a sudden doesn't look that helpful. So Rightmove's in red and Nationwide are in blue. So these are very quickly heading towards neutral and into negative territory. But if we just report it at 3.9% annual growth, it looks quite positive. And then the final headline stat that I want to go over is this bit here, this 11%. 11% increase in buyer demand versus the same period in 2019. And that clearly is the stat they're leaning on to form the headline that better than expected market surprises many as buyers return. So the first question, why are they referencing 2019? Now the reason for this will be probably in their explanation, this was the pre-COVID data, so it makes sense to compare it to then. Well, you have to keep in mind, COVID, the first lockdown for COVID in the UK wasn't until March 2020. So why aren't they using January and February's data in 2020 to compare this to? Well, I think I've got a good idea as to why. This is Nationwide's house price index historically. And if we go back to January 2019, that's showing a negative 0.5%. So if you look at this, over the past 10 years, if you exclude the COVID blip, that was actually the lowest point in the market. Whereas if they compare it to January, the first part of January 2020, before COVID, before the first lockdown, actual is plus 0.5 and plus 0.4. So by comparing it to the lowest point in the past 10 years, if you exclude COVID, they can turn it into a positive figure. Whereas I wonder if they compared it to January and February 2020, whether they'd be able to come up with this 11% increase in buyer demand. So all of these stats can be presented in a number of different ways. Now, I obviously have a negative bias because I'm predicting a crash and that's what I'd like to see happen. But of course, there are other people and other companies like this who would prefer not to see a crash. And I completely understand that. So it's just important when you see this data that you try and analyze it from both perspectives, why it might be positive and why it might be negative. And to be fair to Rightmove, even the ONS have been at it this month. I don't know if you guys have seen the ONS data yet. The main headline is that the average UK house price increased by 9.8% over the past 12 months, but they also reported their first month-on-month decrease. And do you know how they describe this month-on-month decrease? But a slight change from last month's record high of 296,000. So it's 294. So there's been a month-on-month decrease, but instead of saying that, they've called it a slight change. So it's just strange to see it reported like that. And if we scroll down, this is the ONS graph. And if you've watched any of my videos over the past few months, I was talking about this topping out shape here, which was going to take a few months to play out. I think I first highlighted this back in August, September time. And we're now seeing this starting to play out, and this is now going to accelerate, I believe, over the next few months. Now, what we may be seeing at the moment with some of the other house price indexes, such as Halifax, which showed a bit of sideways action this month as well, is after the initial turn, like in 2007 and 2008, you had a small blip there before the real acceleration. So this is exactly what I would expect to happen. The initial turn and panic we've had over the past few months, a slight bit of calm, which may lead to a small pickup there, and then the real meat of the drop over the next couple of years. And just going back to the report, actually, there's one other thing that I wanted to highlight for you guys, and this is something that I tweeted this morning. So this is the smallest increase from January to February on record. So despite the fact some outlets are presenting sideways as relatively positive for the housing market, this is actually the smallest increase ever in asking prices that Rightmove have recorded. And they started recording this data back in 2002. So like I say, I tweeted this morning. This is from Built Place again. This is the February. Let me hide the webcam so you guys can see the most important missing bar here at 0%. Because what happened is after Christmas, people are normally very confident about selling their house. So the first couple of months of the year usually see the biggest month-on-month increases on house prices. But in February 2023, look at that, the lowest since the Rightmove index has begun. So that is news on its own. And again, a shout out to Built Place for producing these charts. So that is it for this week's video. If you're not following me on Twitter, you can follow me at Darren the Degen. And if you want to know why I think that the fall in mortgage rates that we're seeing at the moment will not save the housing market, I'm going to pop up a video in front of me now, and I'll see you guys over there.